Gump Media Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Writer.
And I'm John.
And today we're going to be talking about one of the most acclaimed movies of all time, Forrest Gump. Now, we went back, we watched this, we did some homework. I did a live stream with a watch along with a lot of you guys on Patreon, so thank you, whoever showed up for that. We had some good snacks, we had some good times. I wrote down a whole bunch of notes, and I thank you guys for being here. If you're listening, all your notes are right here, and we're going to talk about them right now. And I just checked with Johnny, and he's got equal, if not more, notes, I think, on his end.
Well, I think you do. It's a good yin yang we have going on here, because I think you do more of like the filming and stuff of like that aspect of it. I'm more of like a deep dive on like the lore of it and like facts about the movie and stuff like that. So
I also realized that I haven't written in pencil in a long time.
Yeah.
So this is going to be fun. But yeah, all right. So Forrest Gump, one of our favorite movies of all time. Last week when we debuted, we talked about different genres. We talked about movies that make you feel, whether it's a horror or whether it's a feel good. And we decided to start this episode off talking about one of the greatest feel good movies of all time, which is Forrest Gump, a movie that essentially just takes this one man through coincidence, or whether it be fate, through almost like every major 20th century moment up until we catch up to the present where he's meeting Jenny.
Yeah, and then it's somewhat of a feel good movie, but it's also a depressing movie. It's it's got a lot. It pulls on a lot of the emotions, I should say.
What's your biggest takeaway from it? Like, going back and watching it, do you end up feeling? How do you feel about? Well, first of all, how do you feel about Forrest's character arc from where he started versus where he ended?
Well, I always thought that was the most interesting part, because Forrest, he's almost like a modern Renaissance man, just because all this what do you call it, like the have a nice day t-shirt and all this stuff, like the you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like the Watergate scandal. It's all he's dipped his toe in pretty much every iconic thing that's happened since he was born in like the 40s or 50s or whatever it was. Like showing Elvis how to dance. That was like one of the first ones, stuff like that. I like Forrest as a character because I think we can all relate to Forrest in a way. And also I think a part of us wants to be kind of like Forrest, like find the good in everything. You know what I mean? And like as much pain as he deals with in this movie, he seems to always be somewhat of a joyful person. You can see a lot of sorrow on his face during the movie and stuff like that, but he seems to always have an outlook on life that kind of just makes him a good person and a happy person, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've noticed that for feel good movies, you really want to start out with a simple character. And Forrest, for all his faults, he grows, he becomes more self-aware, but the main crux of his character is innocence and the idea that ignorance is bliss. And so a lot of things that would be completely crippling and devastating to us, he's struggling 10 steps behind us to even process. All he sees is like Jenny getting grabbed on stage, and he goes, and attacks, and it's just out of pure raw emotion, pure protection, and then there's pure love and admiration. He doesn't even understand the gravity of being sent to Vietnam. He has to explain to Jenny that it's this whole other place, and she has to be the one to explain to him to run. And I think one of the reasons why we gravitate towards these characters is because we feel almost responsible for how vulnerable they are. Like anything can happen to this character at any moment because they're so ignorant, because they're so naive. But he shrugs it off, and he becomes, like I said, he becomes more self-aware as the movie goes on. But in the beginning, you almost like want to swoop him in under your wing because he's so, I don't know, just like easily targeted.
Yes, he that's kind of the thing with Jenny, is like lover, it's a love-hate kind of thing with Jenny, because she suffered her own demons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's like she's so manipulative.
Yeah.
Like so manipulative of Forrest. And like like in Forrest, she knows that she is one of four things that his life revolves around.
Yep.
So it's kind of like you hate her for that reason.
Yeah, I
But
do.
then again, I mean, but then again, she's had her own demons and kind of, for lack of a better word, shitty life.
Yeah.
And in some way, that Forrest is kind of her happiness as well, in a weird, morbid thing because she
Oh
keeps
yeah.
running away from it.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's her homing beacon every time.
Yes.
And the nice thing, the duality of the two situations is that when he's in Vietnam, he's writing to her, all the letters get sent back, and then you come to realize because she's just that feather in the wind, you don't know where she is at any given time in the story, yet she always knows he's going to be at the same house. She knows where to find him every single time,
Yep.
and she keeps coming back. And I think it's because he doesn't leave or he doesn't move that she feels more comfortable leaving because she knows she can always come back. If I left
Yes.
somewhere not knowing whether or not the thing I would be going back to was going to be still there, I have second or third thoughts leaving. But he's
Well, I
very
think
secure in that for her.
yeah, I think part of that for her is that he is genuinely himself and he will always be that person.
Yeah.
And like he won't change as much as she changes, he
Hmm.
will not. Like
Yeah.
cuz he is kind of um sheltered, I
Hmm.
guess.
Hmm.
But in his own way he shelters himself. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Cuz like he'll go to Vietnam, and the way he explains Vietnam
Hmm.
as we just started walking. He does
Yeah.
he's self-aware, but
Yeah.
he's not aware of what's going on.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I remember it's just like the scenes, and this is what makes it so funny is because you take something as horrendous as Vietnam, and then
Yeah.
you add little flares of comedy like his narration on top of what happens. And the one of my favorite scenes is when he's describing the walk through Vietnam. He's like, Lieutenant Dan was always telling us things like "Get down, shut up," and then it's followed by him saying, "Get down, shut up."
Yep.
And then while they're being quiet, the narration goes to a whisper, and he starts like naming where. God damn! This is what happens when you. Sorry for anybody who's watching. This is what happens when you film on an iPhone. Is that every time you give the indication of a thumbs up appears on the
I was
screen.
gonna say I saw that bubble. I was
That's
like, what is going
I
on
gotta
there?
tape my hands to the chair.
Yep.
Yeah, he starts whispering like where everybody's from. Like Forrest,
Yep.
that's not what we should be focused on right now.
Yep. That's one of my favorite parts of that movie, though. Like you said, the Lieutenant Dan line
Mhm.
where he's like, he was always telling us to get down, shut up, and then he says it.
Yeah,
That happens so
it
much in that
happens
movie,
so much.
and you don't realize it until you watch it, like, and really paying attention. It's that movie
Yeah,
it's got a lot of good comedy in
yeah.
it, like that, those kind of lines and stuff like that. But like I said, it's not necessarily a comedy movie, but
Mhm.
it is, to me, it kind of is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And a lot of that is done in post. I mean, you go from I think there's a scene early on when Forrest is still a kid. He's got braces on his legs, and his mom says, "Don't let anybody tell you you're different." And then immediately jump cuts to the school administrator saying, "Your boy is different,
Yep.
Mrs.
Your
Gump."
boy's different.
Like
And then
so good.
I was gonna say, like, and then when you find Bubba in the mix,
Yeah.
and Bubba and him they're like they're just pretty much the same person. His obsession is Jenny.
Mhm.
Bubba's obsession is shrimp.
Yeah.
He'll name, you know what I mean? He'll sit there and name every kind of shrimp, every
Mhm.
kind of how you cook it,
Mhm.
whatever, and he wants to be a shrimp boat captain and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Till but as far as like their friendship and stuff like that, it's like
Mhm.
they're very on their own level, on their own wave.
Yeah.
But their friendship, that just the way they are, they really
Yeah.
relate and come together. It's
Now, do you know was there a draft for the Vietnam War?
yes.
Okay, so I feel like Bubba got drafted because Forrest seemed
Yep.
to have volunteered because he accepted the pamphlet from the guy right after graduation.
Mhm.
Because I would say they're very similar, but there's one main difference between the two, and that's Forrest puts 110% into everything
Yep.
that he does. And like that one scene when Forrest assembles the gun and then disassembles it, the first thing that Bubba says at the end, is the beginning of his shrimp monologue. He's like, anyway, like I was saying, he doesn't care
Yep.
about speed. He just wants to talk about it. Like shrimping is his passion, and if it's not
Right.
shrimping, he'll just go through
Yep.
the motion.
And then I love the parts with his with his drill sergeant too, because he's like he always says Gump's a genius and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just
Jesus
he's
H.
so
Christ.
centered. Yeah, he's just so centered on what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like he just doesn't even know what's going on around him. It's just he's so you know what I mean? Or like when that guy introduced him with that ping pong ball, said
Yep.
never take your eye off the ball, and
Yep.
then
Mhm.
his eyes were on that ball
Yep.
for the
Yep.
whole time.
I just found out a
But
few days ago that that ball was always CGI. And I'm like,
really,
that's crazy for the 90s. Because everybody's like, yeah, you think Tom Hanks became a star ping pong player just for Forrest Gump? I'm like, I don't
yeah,
know.
I could see that
It's
though.
like,
But to your question about the draft, I believe this is how it was. If you enlisted,
mm,
you kind of had a better chance of getting a better position,
oh,
or
okay.
not being sent to Vietnam or being sent to a battle zone.
Okay.
The draft was kind of just a meat grinder kind of thing where
Well,
they just needed
yeah.
bodies.
Well, that sucks because Forrest and Bubba went to the same spot.
Yep. Yeah.
Unless he said there was a scene where he said no and he got drafted anyway.
Yep.
All right.
And then there was that scene. There was that scene where Forrest, Lieutenant Dan, blows up that hole,
Yeah.
and then Forrest like jumps in there with the flashlight. So that's kind of looking at the drafting and stuff like that. That's kind of something that I looked at and I was like, I don't see how that would happen because he volunteered, and that's being a hole rat is one of like the worst jobs in Vietnam
Yeah.
because you crawl through the hole systems and try to kill people with either a knife or a gun.
That's
And there's so many
awful.
booby traps and stuff like that. And these, I mean, Vietnamese people are not big people, so
Yeah.
it's like I'm 6'2" of
Yeah.
270.
Yeah.
So it's like, you think I'm gonna fit in that hole? Nah. You know what I mean? Not happening.
No. If anything, I'm going in that hole, which sucked. Like beforehand, I would eat as much as I could to make sure they didn't pick me first.
Right? Just wiggle your legs outside of
Yeah.
it.
What when going back and rewatching this, what's one of the first traits you noticed about Forrest?
Like I said, he's genuinely a nice guy, and he wants to be. He's very okay. Like the first scene where he's talking to that nurse that comes on the bench, and she couldn't care less. She's just reading her paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He in that scene, he just seems like he's just genuinely a good person.
Yeah.
But he's also very alone,
Yeah.
and he wants somebody to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
So I see he's kind of like an elderly person. Let's put
Yeah.
it like, like an elderly person vibe. I just think he's genuinely himself,
Yeah.
and he's unaware of how somewhat awkward that is.
Yeah.
You know
I
what I mean?
honestly, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Like I said, his need to talk to people is like he's also very alone.
Yeah.
So but he's a social person, and he wants to, interact.
You know what? Actually, that's a good point because my first thing I noticed was when he was a kid. I completely forgot about that one scene, that first scene, the very first scene where we meet current present day Forrest. And that's a good point because that actually points out, that says a lot more about who we are. The fact that he's not able to pick up on the social norms, that you don't talk to somebody else like that on a bus bench. It says a lot
Yeah.
more about regular people than it does about like more innocent people like Forrest Gump, because why shouldn't you be able to talk to somebody on a bus bench about whatever is going on in your day? And that's a very New York and Boston kind of thing. It's like
Oh yeah.
you look straight down at your phone, and your phone is kind of like the way out of these situations, which actually really sucks. And so maybe Forrest represents a piece of us that we wish we still had. I mean, loss of innocence is a big thing in a lot of stories.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like for me, somewhat like, okay, they always say I'm being from the Midwest.
Yep.
The I'd say this is an illusion because it's somewhat true. The Midwest nice is what people say all the time or whatever.
Yeah.
But to be honest, people here are just as big at dicks as they are in, like
yeah.
in New York or whatever.
Yeah.
They're just not really to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They'll do it like after you leave or behind
Yeah.
your back, and they'll listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not genuine.
Yeah.
But like for me, I talk to anybody, and I will talk to anybody. It's just to me, it's awkward to sit there. Like if I was sitting next to somebody on a bench and we didn't say a word to each other, that would be awkward to me.
Yeah.
And I used to be that way. I
Mhm.
used to be a very quiet, shut up person, but then I started selling Harleys. And then
Yeah.
I kind of broke out of that shell.
Yep.
And then I kind of just started talking to people. It's like
Mhm.
you can relate to people a lot more than you think,
Yeah.
but they have to be receptive and open to your conversation.
I
You know what I
remember
mean?
I first started out doing theater and improv classes. One of my favorite shows of all time was Whose Line Is It Anyway? And
Oh, I love it.
yeah, and
Mhm.
so the name of the game of improv, other than just the basic yes and, is that it was your job to fill the void of silence with something. It didn't have to be funny, didn't have to be
Yep.
creative, as long as you kept talking. And so your brain is going a mile a minute to fill that silence. So whatever somebody is giving you, even if it's in
Mhm.
a regular bus bench conversation, you got to give them something back.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're going to have that silence, and that silence is going to only grow. It's going to get worse.
And I mean, I'm not, I'm not completely gone. I know
Yeah.
when it, I can take social cues. But
Yeah.
like back to Forrest too,
Hmm.
that's interesting about him that he's just so genuinely himself and he
Hmm.
just doesn't care.
Yeah.
And he finds good in everything
Hmm.
and he wants to tell people about that and he doesn't
Yeah.
take social cues.
So,
And then
yeah.
but in a way it's a good thing that he doesn't because then that's the entire story of him telling these people about his life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like if he just sat there, we wouldn't have those scenes. We
Hmm.
wouldn't have that storyline.
I think also it's nice that they established that early on as the first
Mhm.
trait that we learn about him is that he's unabashed when it comes to social cues, but he's just genuinely a nice, inquisitive person.
Mhm.
And then that follows through with what I noticed firsthand, or the first from him, is he's very very loyal to family.
Yep.
He is confused when families are broken, and so we learn, and this is what I love about the Forrest Gump exposition, is that yes, there's narration, but also it's not like bashing you over the head with exposition. Okay, this is who my father is, this is who my mother is. Like, so for example, we don't find out that Forrest Gump's dad is not in the picture until
Mhm.
the mother says to the school administrator he's on vacation. And this is what I picked up after um, after the whole, sex scene and everything. Um,
Yeah.
he asks his mom, what's vacation? Where dad went to. And
Mhm.
I was like, oh, he picked up on that. He picked up on the fact that she said that his dad was on vacation, and he's
Yeah.
curious enough to wonder, why is he gone? What does that mean? And then she says, it's where you go away, you never come back,
Mhm.
which is not my
Yep.
experience with vacation, but um yeah, like,
Well, that kind of reminds me of something when I was a kid because
yeah,
we had a lot of pets.
yeah.
And when your pets get put down,
Mm,
your parents want to find us something to say to you to soften the blow a little
yeah,
bit. So they would always tell us that they went to the farm. Now
yeah,
the farm was kind of like in its own way, I guess, a retirement thing for dogs, I
yeah,
guess, live out last but at the end they took them to the vet and they got
yeah.
euthanized.
Hmm.
But it's like that's kind of that kind of reminded me of that. It's
Yeah.
like he went on vacation. He went to the farm
Just as like a
kind of
quick
thing.
anecdote, I remember my mom telling me my first fish went to the ocean, and then I heard my dad in the background yell, "Had to flush twice." I was
But
like,
that's
"What
the
does that
thing.
mean, Dad?"
Oh yeah, that's the thing. It's like moms really want to soften that blow. Dads could care less.
Yep, yep. It's like, thanks,
Yeah.
Dad.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
like yeah, I guess I never I noticed that when I watched it. I actually watched it today
Oh,
again.
damn. Okay.
So I rewatched it just to refresh myself, like right before we started,
Mhm.
and like I caught that where he said his dad's on vacation, and I
Yeah.
never really noticed, you know what I mean, like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you say it, it's like we'd never met Forrest's dad,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I, and they never really explain what that means. Is
Hmm.
he dead? Did he abandon them?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
The funny thing is, when I'm writing a new screenplay or I'm coming up with some exoskeleton of a story, a lot of these little exposition things, these are the end results to some of the basic questions that you ask yourself when you're building a
Mhm.
character, which is, what does their family structure look like? How would they respond to this? How would they react to this? And a lot of times with characters, I'll write questions as like an interview, and I will interview that character and try to see if I could conjure up their voice to see how they would answer certain questions. And so basic world building like this is so creative to figuring out, okay, how do we establish to the audience that he doesn't have a father? How do we
Yep.
establish to this, that this, and honestly, to that point, does anybody down the line, does that affect him? Does he find a father figure in anybody in the story, or does he act like he doesn't, like he needed it? Because I don't really get that much.
I think a little bit of that,
Mm.
like, not really much of a, I guess, a father figure, but
Yeah.
a authority figure. I think that comes into his life is Lieutenant Dan,
Yeah, absolutely.
because even though he's not still like
Hmm.
not in the military, he
Hmm.
still calls him sir. He still
Yep.
calls him Lieutenant Dan. He
Hmm.
is still his subordinate
Yep.
in his mind.
Yep.
Like, even when he's the captain of the boat,
Hmm.
Lieutenant Dan, he's very much, you know,
Yeah.
above him or whatever. I think that's a little bit of him replacing that kind of father figure, but
Yeah.
not enough to the point where it's so out in your face. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Because it's not like he had a deficit of authority. He always cites the lessons that his mom imparted on him. And it's not like
Yeah.
she was never begging for him to come home. She wanted him to go out and find his own voice. Even on her deathbed, he asked, "What's my destiny?" And she said, "You're going to have to find that out on your own." Like,
Yep.
she's not going to give him the answers. She did everything perfectly, as well as she could. And yeah, I was like, she acted as both parents, so you never really felt at any time that he needed a father figure, but he did
No.
definitely found one in Lieutenant Dan,
Yeah.
for better or worse.
hmm But I also thought it was interesting when Lieutenant Dan came into the picture with the shrimping boat.
Yeah.
Did you notice the shift when he came into the picture, that he was like almost like in charge more than Forrest,
Let
because like
Lieutenant Dan.
Lieutenant Dan, because
Yeah.
it's almost like he was more in charge than Forrest, because like even when that lady said that when that lady told Forrest that his mother's sick,
Mm.
Lieutenant Dan was corresponding with everybody. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Forrest was almost like just kind of the silent partner kind
Yeah.
of thing, but he was the
Yeah.
you know
Well, the first thing that happens after Lieutenant Dan saying, "I'm here to be your first mate," is he's up on the mast telling
yeah,
Forrest where to go.
exactly.
you know.
Exactly. So it's like he's kind of calling the shots. He's not in charge, but yet he is in charge, because he
Yeah.
knows he is an authority figure over Forrest.
Yeah. And
And
Forrest doesn't really seem to care much, but
no,
yeah.
I think part of Forrest's thing is, I think he kind of needs that in his life a little bit. Like,
Mm.
his drill sergeant
Hmm.
was kind of that, but not, he wasn't personable with
Yeah.
Forrest.
Yeah.
He got to know Lieutenant Dan for a very long time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they were next to each other in the hospital.
Hmm.
They were on the same unit. He met him in New York,
Yeah.
lived with him in New York or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, there was that mutual respect,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. And like, you got to assume that the drill sergeant told him exactly what he needed to do to survive. So he
Yeah.
probably aided in the fact that he survived Vietnam. But then again, he did run 3 times back into the jungle before it was blown up. Um,
Yep.
but yeah. All right. I had some random questions that I thought, actually, I'll
Sure.
save that to the end. Uh,
Okay.
now, Lieutenant Dan, while we're on the subject of him,
Okay.
personal opinion, do you think Lieutenant Dan hates more that he didn't live up to his family's legacy by not dying, or that he's scared to restart his life?
I think he's scared to restart his life. I think for him, he fell into such a, for me, Lieutenant Dan, when he's in New York,
Hmm.
is just a depressed person.
Yeah.
He's in a depression. He doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, and he knows what he's capable of doing.
Yeah.
He knows there's restrictions now.
Yeah.
And he's also an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So I see him trying to either, I see him just being very depressed, or
Hmm.
almost just trying to kill himself by drinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of thing, cuz but yeah, I mean, I think he hates his situation,
Hmm.
but then that kind of comes around when he meets him in the shrimping boat,
Yeah.
basically.
Oh yeah.
Like that scene that he thanks him for saving his life,
Mm-hmm.
and then he jumps in the water and starts swimming.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when you see the sun coming out from under the clouds,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of Lieutenant Dan's own way of kind of accepting where he's at in life and
Mm-hmm.
accepting that his life isn't that bad. Like
Yeah.
almost like breaking that depression. I
Mm-hmm.
like the sun coming out of the clouds. I think
Yeah.
that's representative of like almost breaking his depression. You know what I mean?
And also, you can't be on the mast in the middle of a massive oceanic
Yeah,
rainstorm and not have accepted death. It like embraced it.
absolutely.
And then, right after,
Yep.
yeah, it's a different form of acceptance. I think looking at the two locations that we saw him in post war, New York City just didn't seem like his vibe. Being on the water, the sense of freedom, like that's where he's destined to be. And also going back, do you think it's telling at all that the only piece of advice that he gave them before they actually started, trekking through Vietnam was to protect your feet?
Um, well, I mean, that is a big part of that was a big part of Vietnam,
Yeah.
just because jungle rot
Maybe I'm
you could
reading too
get.
much into it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, there was there's always stories about like your feet getting. It's almost like trench toe,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
like it's basically like your feet are never dry,
Mm-hmm.
so they kind of just start deteriorating,
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm
and
seeing
stuff
they're
like
in like a swamp that's like chest high in water, and I'm
that.
like, how do you protect your feet from that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they were clearly in monsoon season too, so it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you kind of can't, but it's like that was one of the biggest things that they would see GIs come back to
Mm.
like the infirmaries and stuff with basically jungle rot on their feet.
Oh God.
So socks were a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of like I think the advice with the Vietnam advice, I think too, is like he said, don't do anything stupid like getting yourself killed.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was such a turnover of soldiers
Mm-hmm.
that he was kind of protecting himself
Mm-hmm.
by saying like just don't get yourself killed, stuff like that. But he was also trying not to get to know them enough to the point, because Vietnam, you're here 1 second, you're gone the next.
Yeah.
It's I think he's kind of protecting his own mental health
Yeah.
by
That makes
kind of
sense.
not investing too much into these people.
Yeah.
It's his
Yeah.
responsibility to keep them alive, but
Mm-hmm.
yet it's almost an impossibility.
Yeah.
I think that's the way you're looking at it. You know what I mean?
Well, we're almost a half an hour already in, and I've been kind of
Nice.
I've been dominating with questions. So what you have a bunch of notes. So let me hear some of the stuff that you got.
Well, I was one of the things that I real like kind of pointed out when I was watching it was, did you notice like when he gets a football scholarship,
Mm-hmm.
he's playing for Alabama, and I always thought like he's playing for the Crimson Tide, and I
Yeah.
always thought, "Hey, this guy doesn't know any aspect about football at all. He
No.
doesn't even know what to do. They
Nope.
just tell him run that way."
Yep.
And he's playing for arguably one of the biggest football schools in the nation, probably back then too. And then I also thought it was funny that the crowd would give him like the crowd would like make signs,
Mm-hmm.
and they say "Run, Forrest, run."
Yeah.
And then when he got to the end zone, they would just scream
Stop.
"Stop!"
That's one of my favorite
Yup.
moments.
Yeah.
Like, also, like, it also
Um.
makes you realize. I mean, it reminded me, like in college, where I would have to, in my education classes, they would say, "Okay, write me an essay on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich." And a lot of people in their first try
Yeah.
would just say, "Take peanut butter, take jelly, put it on bread, put it together." And they're like, "Oh, so the peanut butter just magically metastasizes out of thin air?" And they're like, "No." We're like, "Okay, so what do? You have to go to the store." It's like, "Oh shit, okay, it's gonna be like this." So like, the fact
Gotta
that they
break
have to
down.
micromanage even just Forrest Gump's touchdown, like,
Yeah.
to like this way, this way, this way, and then stop, because the first time he barreled through the marching band and down
Yep.
down through the tunnel. I was like, oh, okay, we have to really tell him when to stop.
Yeah. He just wouldn't stop at all. I think that was hilarious. But I do have some interesting facts
Okay.
about the movie. I did a deep dive on some facts.
All
on
right, hit
this.
me.
So, okay, the release date was July 6th, 1994. It opened in 1,595 theaters
Hmm.
for a gross of $24,450,602.
Gross. Okay.
So, yep.
Wow.
So I mean, that's what it hit. It was a you know, pretty big movie as far as back then. I would say
Wait, hold
24
on. All
million,
right. 24
pretty decent.
million 1994.
Yeah.
That is about 50.8 million as of 2024.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's like the opening thing. I thought I saw an article about Forrest Gump that there is a deleted scene,
Hmm.
and they deleted it because they didn't want to. Okay, they kind of didn't want to give Jenny a. They didn't want to give her more of a sympathy path, I guess. But
The editors
there,
hated her.
oh yeah, dude. But there is a twist, and if you look for it, you'll be able to find it. There's a twisted scene where Jenny actually kills her father and
Oh my
makes it
god.
makes it look like a farming accident.
Where would that show up in the story?
It was when she was a really little kid, like really little, like the
So,
little
like
kid.
almost immediately after we see the scene of her running from her dad into the cornfield
Pretty much. It's
and make me a bird. Make
yep.
me a bird,
There's
a murderous bird.
yep. The basically the scene is her dad's on a combine. And if you don't know
Yeah.
what a combine is, it's got that rotating cutter on the
Yeah, yeah,
front of
yeah,
it.
yeah. Is
It
that for like wheat,
rotates.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So like wheat or corn or
Mhm.
whatever. Um, but anyway, there must be like a big rock or something in the field or something that's impeding his way.
Okay.
And he stops and he pulls the brake on it, like
Mhm.
the safety brake on it, and he's in front of the swather, and the swather's just still going.
Okay.
And the camera like looks at him through it, and
Mhm.
then it shows Jenny looking at the brake.
Yeah.
So she's obviously in the scene. She pulls the brake, and
Yeah.
he gets run over by the combine.
Now that's interesting because I don't know if that would make me feel more sympathetic towards her if she did that. I think I'm more sympathetic to the person where, the source of your trauma is still, around and
Yeah,
you kind of have to deal with it and you never got to like seek retribution,
yeah.
you know?
That's kind of where I was at with it too. I was like, I don't know if it'd make me feel any like more sorry
Yeah.
like for her, but to be honest, I would kind of be like, yeah, he kind of deserved it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
he basically was molesting his kids.
Yeah, and then either way though, I think I still wouldn't be able to like look at Jenny without being like, "Yeah, you're a mother now and still a murderer
Yeah,
technically."
for sure, for sure.
But
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting part of it. Like, they
mm,
took that scene out because they thought it would be more of a.
yeah.
They didn't want her to have. I don't know if like that would have made it more sympathetic, but that's where they came up with it.
Yeah.
Like they just didn't want it to be more sympathetic to Jenny. I guess I don't
Yeah.
know.
Maybe it would be kind of beating you over the head with like how reckless she would become after because it's clear how
Yep.
traumatized she was. She was so traumatic that she had to kill her father.
Yep.
But she didn't, and then all of this other stuff happened because of it, because she just internalized all that trauma without being able to do anything about it, without seeking any justice or, retribution.
Yep.
So maybe something like that. I
Yeah.
don't know. It definitely changes the flavor of the story for sure.
Yeah. For sure. And then there's a rosary that Lieutenant Dan wears in the. He's basically wearing it throughout the whole movie, but you see it in Vietnam.
Do we see
Right when
it?
they meet,
Okay, when he's
right,
shirtless?
right when they meet him in Vietnam, when he's kind of walking around, he has a rosary. He also has it when he comes to do the shrimp boat, I believe.
Okay.
That rosary was the actor that played Lieutenant Dan. His brother-in-law was
Gary's
a yep, Gary
Sinise.
Sinise. There you
Yep.
go.
Yep.
But Gary Sinise's brother-in-law was a combat medic in Vietnam that
Oh,
wore that through his whole deployment.
that's cool.
So he honored him by wearing that in the movie, I
Yeah.
guess.
And I will say, like, we got to give him props here on Mad Media that Gary Sinise has done more for veterans than a lot of big celebrity names that I know. He is out there fighting for veterans affairs and
Oh yeah,
benefits constantly. He does some
and he's
great,
such
great
a good
work.
actor.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember
I
the
was gonna
first thing
say,
first thing I saw him on was like CSI New York, unfortunately, and then
yeah. Well, there's there's like these little things that he's in, and then there's like huge movies,
uh-huh.
like Forrest Gump was obviously probably one of his bigger ones, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's that, and then well, okay, there is three people
Hmm.
that were offered the role of Forrest Gump before Tom Hanks took it. Do you know? Could you guess one of them?
Did
Big
Gary
actors.
did Gary audition for it?
Which one?
Did Gary Sinise audition for it?
No.
So I,
It's two actors that aren't in it at all, but they were huge actors at the time.
I don't know.
Three
Like I
three
can't.
actors.
It's so hard because I can't imagine anybody other than Tom Hanks in that role. I
Oh,
don't know. Like I'm gonna spitball. Like Brad Pitt. No, he'd be too young. George
no,
Clooney.
it, no,
Damn.
it
Okay,
was
I'm out.
well, technically there's four
Oh, okay.
because okay, before I get to the three that were considered by the director
Yeah.
of this movie,
Yeah.
the writer of the novel
Oh.
wanted John Goodman to play it because in the novel, I guess Forrest Gump is a 300-pound man.
Oh. He's like
So
a freak the mighty kind of
yeah,
vibe. Okay.
so it's like he always envisioned John Goodman being Forrest Gump.
Poor John
Now,
Goodman.
the, I know, but John Goodman was such a good actor.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
there was a movie that I saw him. He played like the villain in it, and it was Death Sentence with Kevin Bacon. Have you ever seen that?
No. Oh no, but I saw the trailer for that.
Yes,
Yeah.
it wasn't a huge movie,
Yeah.
but John Goodman as the heel
Mm,
basically or
mm.
the bad guy, he
Good
did such a
usage.
good
Good
job.
usage.
Oh,
Yeah.
like as happy as he is in a lot of his films, he
Yeah.
is a scary villain.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He
He's
you
got
can see him
he's got
like,
that undertone in his voice where he could still be smiling at you, but you could hear
oh
the
yeah,
threat. I mean,
yep,
this is nothing compared to the movie you just mentioned, but I saw him as the evil senator in Evan Almighty, and I
yeah,
felt the same thing. But I
mhm.
digress. I don't want to go down the Evan Almighty route.
Yeah, but in Death Sentence, there's one little part in Death Sentence where he basically sells Kevin Bacon's trying to kill his kid, basically. And
Cool.
he knows who Kevin Bacon is,
Mhm.
and he knows that he's trying to kill his kid.
Yeah.
But he's also a gun runner.
Mm.
So Kevin Bacon comes to him and buys all these guns, right? And the first thing you see is him take the money and put it in his drawer, and then he pulls out a gun and like cocks the gun, and then starts telling me, he's like, "Are you are you the one that's after my boy?" and stuff like that. It's such good acting. Like it's just like how he moves with it. It's so good.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah.
But the three big ones, there's four, but one of them wasn't considered. The one that wasn't considered because they said that he didn't have star power
Hmm.
was Bill Paxton, which is outrageous to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Didn't
They
Twister
said
already
that
happen?
in 1994?
Yeah.
Um I want to say yeah.
Yeah. I'll look that up later.
But Bill Paxton he was in a lot of stuff
Yeah.
considering it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and then the three that turned it down because they didn't think it was going to be a big box office hit was Bill Murray,
Okay.
Chevy Chase, and John Travolta.
Oh God, John Travolta.
So they all turned it
No.
down.
No, John
Yep.
Travolta.
Yeah, I know, right? But it's like back then he was huge.
I
You know what I mean?
know. I
Like
just
with Pulp Fiction, and it's
just replace how in Greece just the word Sandy with Jenny.
yeah.
Oh, that would be
Grease is
terrible.
oh, I
God.
kind of I mean I like Grease a lot, but I
Mm,
have kind of a love-hate thing with the movie Grease because I've seen it probably 2,000 times. My mom
I've seen it a
was
lot too. Yep.
oh my god, she would play it every time it was on,
I
and
knew
it's
the
like
hand jive by
so good.
heart.
Oh
But it
yeah.
also
I
teaches
know,
you if you want to get the guy of your dreams, you change everything about you and smoke.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And then it just took for me it took such a weird curve with the gang fight at the end with the street race.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
what's
yeah, yeah.
going on?
I know. Like the way that they represented gangs back in like the 50s and 60s and 70s was just so
Yep.
hysterical. I mean, like for all Leonard Bernstein is one of my favorite composers and conductors of all time, but West Side Story, if you've ever seen it, it's
Oh, yeah.
yeah, Jets and Sharks, but like the way they fight is it's ballet. And so
Like,
like yeah, and the snap, it's like, oh god, the snapping, it's the rattlesnake. But like,
right.
oh god. I don't know. But anyway, okay. So I could see more out of those three. I could see Bill Murray
Mhm.
the most. Um,
Okay.
maybe Chevy
I
Chase. Maybe Chevy
I
Chase.
thought Chevy Chase was a weird one, like
Yeah.
because
Well, they're all weird compared to what we actually got.
to be
Yeah,
honest, I think Bill Paxton would be the easiest fit.
possibly because he's. I mean,
I
he
think
wasn't known for as much as the rest. I guess.
no.
I don't know.
Just looking at those three, I'm like Bill Paxton kind of seems like the obvious like
Yeah, and
pick
it.
for me, but
Yeah, I'd have to really see what the end result would be because even something as small as the voice that Tom Hanks chose to do was only a product of him listening to the child version of Forrest Gump. And because the child spoke in that kind of southern slow drawl,
yep.
he picked up on the voice there. It was going to be a straight southern accent before that,
Mhm.
and then they
Well,
completely changed the character.
yep. Well, on top of that, like you got to think about it this way too, because Tom Hanks modeled his accent off of the kid in the movie.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
So if Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, John Travolta got this,
hmm
how would they model their voice? You know what I mean? Because it's like that was his idea
yeah,
to use
hmm
that kid's accent. So
yeah,
it's like, what would they do for their accent? How would it
yeah.
sound? That's always kind of an interesting
Yeah.
thing to look at too.
I don't see any of them as acting like as innocent as we got innocent Tom,
No,
like babyface Tom Hanks.
yeah,
Yeah. He goes
yeah,
from that to Saving Private Ryan.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like Bill Murray, I can't see Bill
John
Murray doing
Travolta definitely not.
right.
Like
There's
some
also, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I remember Ricky Gervais talking about Steve Carell and saying like, if you want a good innocent and comedic character, it's got to be somebody who's just unhandsome enough to actually be taken as a joke or innocent or something like that. And you're like, Tom Hanks just
Yeah,
got that like that goofy smile, like the big forehead. Meanwhile, you got Danny Zuko over here as John Travolta. I was like, I can't that I don't get innocent vibes from that.
Danny Zuko. That's funny. But yeah, it's like, dude, this movie.
Mhm.
Wait till you hear who was considered for Bubba. It's
Oh,
like I'll go to that. I'll go to that next. But
yeah.
like Robin Wright, she was
Okay.
casted as Jenny, right?
Yep. Yep.
There's two actresses that turned it down,
Okay.
and they're big actresses. Like
hmm
they turned it down because again they thought it wouldn't be a big box office hit.
Yeah.
Nicole Kidman and Demi Moore.
So I could see both. I could see both.
Look at Nicole Kidman, 100.
Yeah.
percent
And the performance of Jenny, it wasn't as impactful enough to where I think to myself that I couldn't see anybody else in it because
No,
she did a great job, but
yeah,
there wasn't a whole lot of redemption that was really needed. There wasn't a whole. I mean, compared to what Tom Hanks was putting down, I could totally
yeah.
see Nicole Kidman or Demi Moore.
Well, it was more of a damaged emotional
hmm
route that and Nicole Kidman I could see doing it. Demi Moore at the time, yeah, I
hmm
could see her doing it too. I
Yeah.
guess I don't know, like I can't remember really what she was
Mm.
in back then.
Did you see anything in your research that said that Sally Field wasn't supposed to play the mother? Because I remember reading
Nope.
something that said that they aged her up, but she was supposed to be something younger in the movie. I don't know if it was the love interest, but she ended up being the mother.
I did not see anything about Sally Field. I don't know if I think Sally Field was pretty much locked in
Yeah.
for the
Okay. Because
mother.
I know they're similar in ages in this.
Yeah,
So
but yeah, I do see what you're saying. Like they had to age her. What
yeah,
was it, like 20 years, 30
pretty
years?
much. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But
yeah. But
strange.
yeah, and then Bubba. There
Yeah.
was three actors.
All
Well,
right.
three. I guess you could say actors back then, but
Okay.
they weren't. that known for acting.
Okay.
One of them was, but the three that were considered for Bubba and they turned it down
Can I guess one?
was yes,
Is James Earl Jones?
nope.
Damn, I was so sure of that one. All right, go ahead.
It's the first one is Dave Chappelle.
No shit.
Yep, Dave Chappelle was considered. He was
Oh
considered.
God.
He turned. Yeah, he turned it down for the same reason. He said it. He didn't think it would do well.
You know what's funny?
Uh,
Was he taken that seriously back in the 90s?
Well, he did Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah.
I can't remember when that came out, but it probably was around the same time about.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was, like I said, like they weren't really known for acting. He wasn't
Yeah.
known for acting back then.
Yeah.
Like he was an actor, but
Yeah.
Robin Hood Men in Tights, and then he might have done a couple things here and there. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
okay.
But yeah, he turned down Bubba.
Mm.
Another one that turned down Bubba was, this one's wild to me, just because he was even considered, was Ice Cube.
No way.
Yep.
The it's just the innocence of Bubba is just completely lost with both of those. It's like I remember what Bubba used to say. Is I'm Rick James, bitch.
You're right. Yeah, with Chappelle, and then were they looking at Ice Cube because he just had a big lip or what? You know what I mean?
But he's got that scowl, and like Bubba had just had like a
does.
deadpan face the whole time.
Yep.
Oh God.
And then the last one was David Allen Greer.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Warmer. Definitely warmer.
So it's like he was an actor. So
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
I could see him over the other two, but
Mhm.
the first two were weird to me because it's like they really weren't actors.
Yeah.
But they were big, but they really weren't actors, I guess.
Who would you have liked to see if you had to recast? Who would you have liked to see as Bubba?
Play Bubba?
Yeah, as Bubba. I'm getting
I think
kind of
Forrest Whitaker would have been a cool Bubba.
yeah. I'm getting like a Denzel vibe, or maybe who's the actor?
Denzel would have been good.
Who is the actor who played what's his name? Uncle Phil in Fresh Prince.
Oh man, I don't know his
Yeah,
name.
you
but
know him or like
Mhm.
Forrest Whitaker. Yeah, something like that.
Or the I'm having a brain fart right now, but the guy that was in Green Mile, who was that
Oh,
guy?
Michael Clark
What's his
Duncan.
name? Michael Clark Duncan, I think.
Oh,
He would have been an
definitely.
interesting
He would have
one.
been a great Bubba. I don't think
But if Bubba was,
Tom Hanks
8
could
feet
carry
tall.
him out of the jungle. It was like, Bubba, you're gonna have to stay right here.
They would have had to turn him into a Lieutenant Dan and start chopping parts of his body off too. But yeah, I thought those were really interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
also, when I noticed when in your stream
Mm.
you were talking about like the filming locations for
Mhm.
the Vietnam and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I took notes of that while you were talking about it. And the Vietnam scenes were filmed on the coast of South Carolina.
Oh, okay. Okay.
They brought in like palm trees and tropical trees and
They
stuff like that. And
brought in.
planted them.
Okay.
Yep. Just to kind of make it look a little bit to basically the entire movie,
Mhm.
except for certain parts where he's like obviously in Washington
Yeah.
and then he's running across the United States and
Mhm.
stuff like that. But almost the entire movie is filmed in South Carolina,
Okay. All right.
all the
Yeah.
way to like the deep delta scenes where Bubba's mom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's just filmed in a different part. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And I totally got the Southern vibe from that. And I know they got the rights to blow up a certain section of a place that was already zoned for demolition. So they got the rights to blow it up, which I thought was pretty cool.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that made me think of Tropic Thunder. And that really ruined that scene for me because I couldn't help myself from like giggling a little bit because of how badly it went in Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunder.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's really refreshing to see a movie without green screen. You know, to really feel the scope and the depth and the layers of the world that is being built and know that, okay, it's not like Captain America Brave New World where you can clearly see the green screen in the back. And I was like, I really feel like I'm there. And it's just so different now than, how now it is.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
I believe we talked about this before, just in conversation. But the opening scene of Gladiator,
Yeah.
that is That's actually they found the forestry division gave them a plot of land to
Mm.
destroy with like fire bombs and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
That's all just real,
Yep.
you know.
That's awesome. Got a few more minutes left. Let me run through some random questions. Just pick your brain. Uh let's see where we go with this. I just had some random thoughts and I just wrote my random ADHD thoughts down and I was like, let's see if we can like answer some of these like random questions from Forrest Gump.
Okay.
All right. They never mention it, but what's Forrest Gump's degree in? If you had to guess, what would Forrest Gump's college degree be in that he never got to use because he immediately got listed into the Vietnam War? What would
Yeah,
Forrest
he
Gump go
was.
for?
I'm gonna say I'm probably horticulture.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean,
Yep.
became a
Or
lawnmower.
athletics.
Maybe athletics. Yeah.
I was gonna say just because he was fascinated with running and stuff like that. He wasn't like he never put emphasis on like the health aspect of it. He
Nope.
just enjoyed running.
Yep.
So, I would say those two.
That works. I can see that. Where is Tex from?
If I had to guess, Texas. But yeah, I don't know.
Well,
Like I
no.
said,
If you remember, all of them were from different places. There was like Dallas.
yep.
He was from Idaho or wherever.
Yeah, but like I think that's part of the comedic thing about it is like because everyone is like Cleveland was from Detroit,
Yeah.
and then the other guy was from a different place, but then he says Dallas, and then
Mhm.
I think Dallas is from Dallas because he's like because he's just kind of like I don't really remember where Dallas is from.
Yeah.
In my head, that was part of like that comedic timing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you know,
Definitely.
I'll say Dallas. I think Dallas is from Dallas.
All right. Last one. This one's a little bit more inquisitive and you know
Okay.
philosophical. Do you believe that Forrest Gump just felt like running?
Um. Yeah, I think he just. Well, to be honest, I think it had a lot more to do with what was on his mind.
Oh
Like
yeah.
just to get. I think it was an activity to get stuff off
So
his
there is
mind.
some
'Cause-
motive behind it. It
Yeah,
wasn't
I
like
think.
he
Well,
was able to just kind of set the Jenny absence aside and run because that's exactly what happened directly before his, months long
yeah.
run or
Well, you have to
years
look
long.
at it. Yep.
Yeah.
But you have to look at it like that is the motive behind it because
Yeah.
if Jenny was still, would he have done it?
No. No.
I don't think so. I don't think he would have. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Do you
I
think?
think he was trying to fill a void,
Mhm,
and that's what he did. And to be honest, and like we talked about before,
mhm,
he is a very alone person, and he's a very
mhm.
like he kind of just lives in his own world. So that
Yeah.
was his way of kind of
Yeah.
just clearing his mind, and
Yeah.
then yeah,
And this is one of the biggest philosophical questions that I have because of that. Because he not only did he go running, but he went running for like 3 years or something like that, something
yep.
close to that. Do you think at any time, first of all, in the beginning portion of the movie, do you think that he intentionally? I know he went and traveled to China and went to all these different
Mhm.
places in Vietnam, but do you think after a while he knew that Jenny knew to find him at home? And do you think there was ever a moment where he intentionally stayed home in case she needed him? Like he understood that
Yeah.
she was his rock because
Oh
he
yeah.
decided to go on a 3 year run. So if that's true, does that
Mhm.
3 year run then imply that he's given up on the idea that he is her foundation?
I think it's part of it. I think that was part of his reason behind it because he kind of just like, well, that's that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Kind of
yeah,
thinking. But do you also think part of his running was also trying to find Jenny?
possibly. Didn't he like run through her town at one point, or she just saw it on the news?
Saw it on the news.
Oh,
Yeah. But who knows? I mean, he could have ran through,
maybe.
because the other interesting part when she's a waitress,
Yeah,
she was only like a state over.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
she was in what, Mississippi
yeah,
or something like that, or
yeah.
Georgia. I think
Hmm.
she was in Georgia.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing
I
too.
do
It's like
think
she was
though.
always
Yeah.
close.
I do think though, if he actually was directly searching for her, he probably would have asked a reporter or somebody who's asking him why he's doing it. Because they asked him, they were trying to find some meta reason why he was doing it, world peace or whatever.
Yeah.
And, of course, shit happens, and the Smile Have a Nice Day happened during that.
Yep.
Yeah, but he ended up in like the Midwest, and like like it looked like Arizona or Colorado that he ended up in.
It looked like he even went up to like the Northeast.
Yeah.
It's like there was those.
Oh, he went up to Maine.
it's-
Yeah.
Yeah, there was those lighthouses.
Yep.
And
He
then most of
followed
them
the coast all the way up. And so I thought that was interesting because I was like, wow, that is really big. I mean, Jenny did return his medal, for God's sake, but that is really big of him that he would do something like that. And maybe he wasn't thinking about it, but to me, it almost looked like a growth in his character that he was willing to put aside being her rock and foundation because that betrayal finally happened. I mean, the night before, they literally had a conversation about marriage.
Yep.
And the next day, the ultimate betrayal happens. And one last thing I wanted to talk about, which is I think really important, just as important, is the score. Is that in those scenes after when Jenny abandons him, silence, nothing, no feather theme, no soundtrack, no AC/DC, just silence and just slow pushing shots of him sitting in a dark, empty house. And you really feel how empty that house is when there's silence and it's just him sitting in one spot by the window. And you can kind of feel it. And then it just slowly builds to that part where he just gets off the porch and just goes running. And I was like,
And then,
so good.
well, I think part of the music when he's running too, like they're playing those upbeat like 90s and 80s, running on empty and stuff like that, and it's supposed to like be like a happier time. I think that's significant, like signifies like that he's kind of just happy on his own, doing his own thing at the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like you said, Jenny gave him his medal back. I think that was supposed to be looked at as her saying goodbye for like good.
Yeah.
If she didn't get pregnant with his child, I don't think he would ever saw her again.
Probably. Yeah, definitely. Because
So
she wouldn't have a reason. I feel like, yes, there probably is some love. I mean, it's misguided at best, but I think the only reason why she contacted him was just so she was afraid that her son was going to be put into foster care.
Yeah. Yeah, there was that. And then on top of that, it's like when she kept coming back, she was always just getting loaded and like meeting dudes that would beat on her. I think, like I said, I think he was just a safety net for her because she knew that she could go there.
Yeah.
She's not gonna get messed up. She's not gonna get beat up.
Yeah.
And he is financially stable enough to kind of let her just but then she's such a bitch for leaving every time. It's so bad.
Every time.
It's like, what are you doing?
And
It's
to
like you
that,
come back.
Yep.
That's why I say she's so manipulative, because she gives him hope so much and then just crushes him.
Well, the main question I had at the end was, I don't know a whole lot about foster care or anything, but like, does marriage affect your guardianship of the kid? Like, if they weren't married, could she still give in her will sole guardianship to Forrest? Because if she couldn't, if it only happened through marriage, that's the ultimate manipulation of the movie. Asking him to marry her just so she can give her custody of her child to him when she passes.
Well, there's that, but I think if she could prove that it's his kid, he would be the next person in line.
Okay,
but
so,
also I think it also kind of works this way too. Would they find him not competent enough to take care of a child?
Yeah.
So I think marriage kind of canceled that out.
Okay.
But you got to look at it this way too. There's nothing in that movie that ever says that kid is Forrest Gump's.
That's true.
Except for the mannerisms.
Yeah.
Like the head nod and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there is never anything that implies that is 100% his kid.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Haley Joel
So
Osment.
that's kind of, yeah. That's kind of pretty much. But it's like, that's kind of the way to look at it too. It's like, you never know if that's truly his kid.
Yeah.
You want to think it is, but
yeah,
she could just have been like, well, I'm going to die. This kid's going to go into foster care.
Oh God, that would be so much worse if she knew that it wasn't. Oh, this would be, see, okay, this would be, you know, how we were.
Angle.
All right. So to anybody like who are listened, I think, to the last episode, I think we mentioned it briefly. If not, we'll talk about it now. We had mentioned an idea on the pod where we were going to spend an
Yeah.
episode or like a mini episode changing one little thing in a story of like a famous movie or show and just coming up with alternate endings. This would be a perfect one if like Forrest
Yeah.
Gump's kid wasn't his kid. Jenny knew about it. I mean, it
Mhm.
doesn't change how manipulative I feel Jenny is anyway,
Mhm.
but my
Mhm.
God, that would change a whole lot.
Well, you gotta look at it too. On top of that, she did not send him a letter until she knew she was dying.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know what I mean?
I'm
So
not a
it's like
fan of Jenny.
that's the angle I'm looking at it. Like I hope it's his kid,
Yeah.
but I'm looking at the angle as it isn't. And
Yeah.
she also knows that he will take care of it if she tells him that
Yeah.
that is your kid.
Yeah. Because she keeps saying she was messed up. Not a
Right.
whole lot has changed after, like,
No.
even after that. Um,
But
yeah.
I'm just looking at it because she's so manipulative through the movie. Why
Mhm.
stop there?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That
And I listen to a lot of people give their reviews of Forrest Gump and their reactions to it. And as soon as she tells him and they realize that that kid is his and that she's about to tell him that
mhm.
the kid is his, they turn on Jenny so hard. And they
Yeah.
come down on her saying, this kid is however many years old and you've kept
Yeah.
him from him. His kid or
That's
not.
another
Either
Yep,
way,
that's
you're not
another way
coming
to
out
look at
looking
it.
good.
Yeah, she knew where he lived.
Yep.
She knew where to send that letter.
Yep.
It's been years since that kid's been born.
Yep.
And then she found out that she's dying.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's Forrest Gump's kid. Now she
Yeah.
wants to declare
Yeah.
it's Forrest Gump's kid.
Yeah. Not to
All
mention
right.
the fact that Forrest Gump is a multimillionaire by that point, and
Yeah.
she's probably working doubles on doubles on doubles at that restaurant
Mhm.
just to make ends meet with her son, hiring a babysitter. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, man, you're really like putting a pin in this end because I really feel like that's not his
Yep.
kid now.
But I mean, to Jenny's credit, also, he did have that money for a long time,
Mm,
and she could have came and married him and lived off that or whatever.
yeah,
And so I can't look at it as a way as she's trying to be a gold digger because she clearly isn't. She could have done that for
yeah.
so many, you know what I mean?
I think
But
it
that
changes
kid,
when you have
the
the
kid,
kid, though. Yeah,
yep. I
yeah,
think the kid is the wrench that got thrown into the spoke. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like
yeah, yeah,
as far as that. But there's like I said, there was that thing that kind of just said is like, I don't think that's Forrest Gump's kid. I think she's just looking
man.
for a way out that this kid is going to have a good life,
Uh,
which is a good thing.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm,
you're telling that guy that that's his kid.
mm-hmm.
It better be his fucking kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. All right,
So
final question. And this is
let's
a
hear it.
really philosophical one. And this is the question that they kind of pose through the entire theme of the movie, which is, do you think it's a plan or do you think we're just floating through life on a breeze?
Oh, about everyone having destiny,
Yeah.
like their own
In
destiny.
his closing monologue to Jenny. Yeah, do you think it's life is predetermined or do you think we're just floating on a breeze? I mean, think about the life of Forrest Gump, and that's the everlasting question. He managed to find his way into almost every single historical event of the 20th century.
Yep. But I think for me,
Mhm.
I think we're just floating on a breeze.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the way he came into contact or he came into like know or be a part of all these situations of
Hmm.
these pop culture situations, he was just floating through life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lieutenant Dan should have died on that battlefield.
Yep.
You can't say that's destiny because if that was his destiny, it was interrupted by Forrest Gump. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah.
So Lieutenant Dan's just floating through life kind
Yeah.
of thing. I would say they're floating through life is a little
Yeah.
bit more of a
But then you're going
for
to get
sure.
people who are going to say, like, oh, well, they had just happened. You're saying it's a coincidence that they just happened to be put in the same squadron together. And to me, I would just say, kind of, yeah. Like trying to just justify what could be just
Yeah.
a coincidence. It's kind of meaningless because I
Yeah.
personally believe it just kind of happened.
Well,
And you're damn lucky that that just worked out the way it did.
yeah. Well, you got to look at it this way too.
Mm.
Was it a coincidence that they were put on the same squadron? Maybe.
Yeah.
But you never hear Forrest Gump talking about being a shrimp boat captain until Bubba came along. He's
Yeah.
just floating through life.
Yeah. Yeah. Also,
He found an
yeah.
opportunity
Yeah.
and he made a
Yeah.
promise.
Yeah, I also am kind of wary of the idea of predetermination because that completely takes all of your autonomy and your ability to kind of take life by the horns away. And just saying everything is predetermined, so no matter what happens, it's supposed to happen. I kind of call BS on that. I say, if you were going to go and do something, go and do it. It wasn't going to happen until you decided to do it. So nothing is predetermined until you make it certain in the ethos.
Well, yeah, and to your point, if everything's predetermined, then why take anything seriously or have the ambition to go for anything? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're an actor.
Mm-hmm.
It was predetermined that you were going to be the next Leonardo DiCaprio. You know what I mean?
Yep. And then that completely.
Why?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Why try so hard?
Yeah. And then just saying, like, and then if you bomb an audition, you just say, "Oh, that was meant to happen." You just completely remove any sense of responsibility from your mistakes.
Yeah.
So,
and like those, you can find the people that think that pretty quickly when it comes to like music or acting, like what we talked about. Like you said, if somebody bombs an audition and it's the end of the world, use that to build you up. It's not the end of the world. It's a learning experience.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, you lose the genuine purity of the character and the drive of Forrest Gump if you say that everything is kind of predetermined, because then you take away any potential arc, any responsibility that he might have for creating such a life for himself. Because not only, yes, he stumbled upon certain things, but then there were other things that he did that were completely on his own volition, like giving the money to Bubba's family. Like they weren't ever guaranteed that money. That was a conscious choice by him. That wasn't in the ethos until he came along.
Yep. And then to your point, the only ambitions that he had in life were to his mother and Jenny.
Yep.
So where's the ambition to make $1 million on a shrimping empire?
Yeah.
He got that from Bubba, and then he stuck to it. Like with Bubba, he stuck to his word. He made a promise that he was going to give it to Bubba. Bubba is dead now, so it goes to his mother. He didn't have to do any of that. He could have went home and lived with his mother.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's the way you got to look at it. He had ambition to do these things that he didn't have to do any of them.
Yeah.
So, you know, if it's predetermined, then I guess, but he had more. I think that's also a discredit to him. As a character, because he had more ambition than I think he had the ambition that a lot of us would like to have. You know what I mean?
Yeah. My personal opinion as a writer is that characters who are able to make their own decisions are the ones that we invest in.
For sure.
There's no arc if there isn't.
Yep.
So,
and then also we want to relate to those people in the sense that we can kind of form our own destiny.
Yeah, it's okay to start a character off. Yeah, exactly. In a positive change arc that we see Forrest Gump go through, it's okay to have a character start off as a victim of the world, but you definitely don't want them to be that at the end.
Well, yeah, and why I say that he didn't have to do any of these things is because he wasn't flashy.
No.
He lived in the same house he had. Yeah. He mowed his own lawn. He never had a car.
And he mowed the high school's lawn for free.
And that's why I'm saying it's like he could have done all that without a shrimping empire. So he had drive.
Without investing into Apple, without, I think the ball is already rolling for the alternate endings for Forrest Gump, because you actually got a lot of wheels turning in terms of how I feel about the ending of this movie and people's motives. But I appreciate everybody who came to watch the live stream, to react with us, to sit back, eat some snacks. We'll be doing that again next time. I think we'll be doing it this coming Thursday will be the pod. Wednesday night we'll be watching The Sandlot on Patreon. So if you guys are a Patreon, come and join us. It's a lot of fun. I'll be posting the link pretty soon. I've never seen Sandlot. Johnny's seen Sandlot, so it's gonna be interesting.
Favorite movie.
Yeah, I know, and it's a crime that I've never seen it. I know the lines, the famous quotes and everything, but
you're gonna love it. You'll love it.
I'm sure I'll love it. So Wednesday night, I'll post that pretty soon. So thanks so much, guys. Until next time, I'm Writer.
I'm John.
And we'll see you next time.